Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your intrepid host, AE, and today I am joined by the ever wonderful and a brand new guest for the channel, Mr. Newsfist, who has previously been known to show up on News's channel, but now he is online. So, without further ado, Mr. Newsfist, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for the invitation, man. I always love to talk about multilateral institutions and the crazy freaks who run them. It's a bit of an area of either madness or speciality for me. I'm not sure. One of the two.
I would definitely say it's a mix of the both, having met you at the OGC event last week, which we discussed these people in depth. For which you are
Yeah.
very knowledgeable. That was a very enlightening conversation, and it was so interesting. I wanted to have you on my show, where we could discuss it in front of the masses. Actually,
No, thanks, man. Do you want to just should we get into it, or do you have more intro to do?
no, let's just get into it. So our
Okay.
topic for today is we're going to be discussing uh, the ideology and the ideology of the ruling class of the people we call the globalist ruling stock right now. These are your Klaus Schwab's, Bill Gates, Ursula von der Leyen type of people. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. And I brought an expert who knows these people very well and what their ideology is in their praxis. So without further ado, Mr. Goosefist, who are these people? Let's go ahead and get started.
Well, who are they? Okay, well, that's a very interesting question. It seems that a lot of the ruling elite are sort of either members of sort of quite old families, like the Rockefellers. There's the sort of banking nexus that's extremely important. In terms of governance, you have a lot of people that seem to have been groomed by Fabian socialists. It's hard to know precisely where a lot of these people come from. In order to sort of gain democratic power, it is always beneficial to such people to say, "Oh, I'm just like you." You know what I mean, right? Like, I mean, we're going through an election in the UK at the moment, and soon to be Fabian Prime Minister is being like, "Oh, yes, I'm the son of a toolmaker. I'm just like you. I'm just like the man on the Clapham omnibus." But they're not. They have a fundamental. These kind of people, in my opinion, they are groomed to rule. Right, in the UK, this is very explicit. There are certain schools that you can go to where they will teach you how to rule. Um, you will study subjects that would not be given to sort of the plebs on the street. There was a really interesting question from I think it was Oxford University that was going around when I was at university, right? And the reason I came across it is that many of the people at the university that I was going to were like, "Oh, this is a terrible question. How could you give this to students?" And the question was thusly: imagine that there has been a major strike or a food shortage, and in order to keep control, the police had to kill 8 civilians. You are the prime minister, and you have to go on TV to explain this, write a speech as to how you would do it. Right now, personally, I thought that was a great question. I mean, if you want people who have the ability to rule, these are the kinds of situations they're likely to get into. But my point is that our rulers think of the way society works in a very different way to the people on the ground. So the first thing that they all sort of share, I guess you could call the will to rule, right? The idea that they should rule, and then this is backed by certain rulership skills, which I've got to say seem to be declining. If you look at the current crop of people who are at the top, we have lost people like Brzezinski, Kissinger, the other, Jewish greats that sort of like kept the West alive. And regardless of what you think of their policies and whether they were good people, something I would dispute, it cannot be denied that particularly people like Kissinger and Brzezinski, they knew what they were doing. They knew how to conduct diplomacy. They knew how to, manipulate the masses. They knew how to sort of like think looking forward. And the people that we've got now seem to have lost the skill of diplomacy, and unless of course they haven't, and it's just being deliberately suppressed. I'm talking about the war in Russia specifically here. They're not talking to the other side. So either they've lost the ability to do diplomacy, or they're just deliberately not doing it because they want a war. So the other thing that they all have in common is not just the will to rule, but the will to rule and a transformative desire. Excuse me. They want to change the world to make a better world, right? Now, one of the problems with this conception is that it sounds very anodyne, right? Like, you can go to the average person and say, oh, we want to make a better world. But it's the devil is in the details, as they say, right? Like, better for whom exactly, right? It's very, very hard. In fact, I would say impossible to make a better world for everyone. Indeed, you might have heard of Schmidt, Carl Schmidt, the famous German. Was he a judge? Who expressed the idea of the Schmittian exception, that sovereign is he who decides upon the state of exception, and also the idea of the friend-enemy distinction, which, although very often misunderstood on Twitter, is essentially the observation that any political system will favor some people and disadvantage others. Therefore, any group of people that form a political system have friends that they are trying to advantage and enemies that they are trying to disadvantage. And, people such as Lindsay and his adherents say, oh, well, this is very, very bad. What we need is a system that benefits everyone. But they don't really follow that, right? They don't want a system that benefits neo-Nazis. They don't want a system that benefits Stalinists. They don't want a system that benefits the queers. You know what I mean, right? Like, it's a so you have this transformative urge, okay? And this is one of the things that sort of goes into the formation of the United Nations, mainly through a religion called Theosophy that was invented by Helena Blavatsky back in 1875, so the late sort of 19th century. And this idea is that essentially we can have world peace, okay? And we can have world peace by erasing the distinctions between everyone. This starts with religion, obviously, right? Theosophy has this idea that, each religion is really just trying to get to their God in, their own way, right? That everyone is seeking the same God. I vehemently disagree with this. I'm sorry. In my opinion, that is just crap, right? Not only are these gods quite different, and the way that they are reached is also different, it also tries to dilute any sense of real religious feeling, particularly among Christianity, as I'm sure you would have noticed living in the West. If you want to sort of fervently express a desire to believe in Islam or Hinduism or Judaism, that's all fine. But expressing too strong a view in Christianity is kind of basically frowned upon. So you have this transformative urge, and through a funny coincidence, the people who have this transformative urge always imagine themselves at the top, deciding how the world will be transformed, and most importantly, deciding who gets what when, right? So they come on with this idea, oh, we're going to help the poor, we're going to eliminate poverty. And you're like, well, how are you going to do this? And they're like, well, we'll set up this huge foundation, this huge organization, whereby we will control money flows, and we will decide who is worthy and who is unworthy, and we will give money to the worthy. So again, this is the friend enemy distinction basically like coming up again. You cannot avoid it. Any group that tries to make a system that benefits all, they always wind up sort of disadvantaging certain groups, either based on ideology or action. And some of this is quite correct, right? You don't want to make a society that privileges the murderers. I mean, I guess unless you're LA Democrat or something like that. You need, some kind of idea behind it. And really what it all comes down to is these people they have achieved world government. People are banging on about, oh, we don't want a world government. Well, tough. You've already got one. We've had one for a while. What we've been seeing recently is that world government flexing its muscles, and most importantly, trying to set up taxation flows, because for any government needs taxation, and for a global government you need global taxation, and that is a big part of things like carbon taxes and contributions to the WHO and all of this kind of other stuff. So really, it's the will to rule and the will of a transformative desire to transform the earth into their image, generally coupled with this idea that they have sort of a religious sort of Gnostic insight into what it is that God wants, which grants them the ability, nay, the duty, to reform the earth in the way that they desire.
Interesting. I would very much agree with that. That view that these people have, that almost James Lindsay, and forgive me for even mentioning his name.
No, look,
You
I
know,
rate Lindsay very, very highly when it comes to things like describing Marxism. I rate him very, very highly when it comes to digging into stuff like queer theory. I think that the problem is that he's never studied political science. So there's just a bunch of stuff about how politics works that I don't think he really grasps. So yes, I have a bit of a, not exactly a love-hate, but a love-annoyance relationship with Mr. Lindsay, in that some of his content I think is really, really good, and some of his other content I've sort of listened to, and I just sort of facepalm spectacularly, because he has a tendency to sort of ignore certain crucial parts.
It does, especially when it comes to members of a certain tribe with tiny hats. But although, if recently he seems to have a conversion because he loves them apparently so much and recognizes divine authority when it comes to why they're allowed to rule, essentially. So that's a very interesting turn of events from Mr. James Lindsay there. But these people definitely do seem to have that Gnostic worldview, that they know the truth about, sort of this demiurge that's actually causing all the problems in the world, and only there it's applied to them. And of course, conveniently, it's everything that Demiurge wants is aligned with the liberal progressive narrative. That's sort of the religious sentiment behind it.
It's maybe an unpopular thing to say, but I have studied quite a bit of small hat thought, because they're fascinating, man. Their history is quite amazing. Honestly, one of the things I like the most about studying Jewish history is it's a bit like Game of Thrones, with literally 100 seasons and everyone's smoking crack the entire time. It is the craziest history on the face of the earth, right? It's fascinating. But one of the things that seems to have been borrowed from Judaism generally, and possibly Hinduism, is the idea of the world to come, right? Which is distinct from the Christian idea that the sort of the end point of a better world comes after you die, right? The world to come is something that can actually be manifested on earth. This is the idea of the Tikkun Olam, of remaking the world into a better world. And again, of course, the question has to be asked, well, better for whom exactly? And better for the people who can see, the people who know. You're right. There is a big sort of strain of Gnosticism going through a lot of this. The idea that with the right eyes, you can see what it is that God really wants, and yet at the same time, these people, they don't really believe in God. They have a sort of weird kind of Freemasonic view of God, right? God is just the universe, or the thing that created the universe. Or sometimes, God is man, depending on the strain of Gnosticism. And this leads to this idea that God, number one, is understandable. So if you believe that it is the universe that is God, or the grand watchmaker or something like that, then you can understand God by studying the universe. Or if you believe that God is man, which is the even sort of more dangerous idea, then there is no sort of real external moral framework that needs to be adhered to. Right? This leads to sort of the Marxist conception that man makes his own moral framework. And I'd just like to point out that, in my opinion, this is one of the reasons why societies based upon these models are very short lasting. You may have heard of a concept called the 80-year curse that is popular among the Israelis, and this is this prophecy that it'll only last for 80 years. And it's been my observation that societies built upon these ideas are very, very short lasting. They don't have any staying power because they rapidly collapse because there's no real sort of rigid defining structure. And a lot of these beliefs, quite frankly, they just make for bad societies. So, there's an argument that, I think is a reasonable one to make, that many religions, like the old ones, are basically a kind of survivorship bias, right? So you have two cities, right? One of whom was faithful to God, and followed the commandments, and they lived right, and they didn't sin, or they tried to sin as little as possible. They sort of made it like a big thing that people shouldn't sin. The government did not abet sin. And then you have another city, on the other side of wherever, and they're the complete opposite. They're like, man makes his own laws. There's no such thing as sin. You can do whatever you want. The society that sins massively is prone to collapse very, very quickly, often. And so what you wind up with is the religions that have survived, the societies that have survived, have a kind of survivorship bias. That there's that old saying that tradition is just a solution to a problem that has since disappeared. And you can see this very, very easily, because when you abolish all of the traditions, all of the problems that those traditions were keeping in check suddenly remanifest.
I think a great historical parallel to what you just mentioned actually was, and I know this is a very trite historical example that we love to bring up, but Weimar Germany was very much akin to that case, where after Germany was defeated in World War One, and the Treaty of Versailles was applied to them, and they had this brand new democratic society full of democratic values of gay marriage, and of course we're finding out trannies, all this other stuff. Like, that society was rapidly degenerate, and it lost all of the values and the tenets and principles that made Germany like great in the first place. And we saw the reaction to that society and why that reaction was so severe to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Weimar Germany actually I mean, I know why people bring it up so much, because the modern West does seem to be kind of speed
It's a
running.
mirror image of it, actually.
It is a mirror image, and I think you could lay a lot of reasons why it didn't work, but much of it comes down to this sort of critical deconstruction of every truth, right? Um, One of the things that these people love to do in order to undermine sort of any kind of stable system is they take an edge case, right? Any edge case you can find. Okay, so let's take the immutable truth that men are men and women are women. Okay, so they'll cast around and they'll find like an edge case, someone with Klinefelter syndrome, or some sort of genetic mutant, and they'll be like, "Ha, we have found an example where this person could technically be half man or half woman." And then they leverage this into the idea of saying, well, because we have found this exception, rather than sort of doing the thing of like, well, the exception proves the rule, right? You always find like weird exceptions to anything. They then demand that the entire system be torn down and reconstructed to include all exceptions. And the idea, basically, of course, is just to destroy the stability of any kind of stable ideas. And this is why it goes to crap so quickly, because many of these sort of stable ideas are sort of mental logical signposts for how people navigate the world. And I think that there is a big sort of like Gnostic idea that runs through a lot of this idea, this structure of being liberated from the world, right? If you've read like enough leftist literature, you will notice that liberation, it comes up again and again. Marcuse was very, very fond of this idea. We will liberate ourselves from, it starts off from, the chains of
Yes, this Rousseauian idea of total freedom, right?
yes, and I mean Rousseau was an idiot in my personal opinion. He put forth a lot of really, really crazy ideas. The most notable one, excuse me, of course, being the idea of the general will, which was basically that if 51% of a society believe and want to do a thing, then by definition, it is the general will, and the other 49% have to go along with it. Now, this is so ludicrous that, I mean, you're asking for civil war. This is a recipe for civil war. This is one of the things that, in my opinion, people don't understand about democracy and what is essentially mob rule. If you just have a situation where 51% of a society can impose their rules upon the other 49%, you have civil war. Republican governments are actually designed so that there are hard limits to what a government can do and what a people can demand. So yeah, but you can basically say, yes, we're going to liberate ourselves. But again, the liberation of yourself from these things always comes at a cost to someone else. Okay, so you want to liberate yourself from work, for example, right? Well, that generally means that you want someone else to pay for you to work. You want to liberate yourself from gender. There are these knock-on effects that go all through society, and I think a big swath of these ideas have basically made themselves into the global elite. To just go back to original topic, since we got off topic a little bit. So a big part of the religious background of the international elite, as I was saying, and the UN in particular, is a religion called Theosophy, which is a spiritual movement that emerged in the late 19th century through the work of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society. Now, the basic tenets of Theosophy revolve around a blend of Eastern and Western religions and philosophical ideas, aiming to explore the nature of divinity, the universe, and humanity. Thank you very much, ChatGTP, for this excellent summary. It's quite like ChatGPT is actually legitimately quite good for just giving like summaries of stuff, but you'll see what I'm getting here, right? So, number one, universal brotherhood. This is something that runs all the way through the UN, from Blavatsky to Alice Bailey to people like Mueller. This idea that, we're all just one big human family, right? Like, really, we're all basically the same. There should be no reason why everyone can't live together. John Lennon's Imagine plays in the background. Now, as much as I would like this to be true, I mean, I think this would be lovely. If the world really worked like this, I would be a very, very happy chappy. I'm not, one of those people who are like, I hate the idea that people could get along. No. It just doesn't seem to work that way, right? Like, as we are finding out all over the
The
West.
problem with it is it's a lie.
Yes, it's a lie. And this goes back to the, again, the sort of harsh truths versus comforting lies. So universal brotherhood, Theosophy emphasizes the unity of all human beings, advocating for a universal brotherhood without distinctions of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. This principle promotes the idea that all life is interconnected and interdependent. And again, from this, you can see sort of, the birth of the idea of like Gaia. This is also sort of also a very Gnostic idea. You saw this be very, very big in the 60s, hits joint. We're all just like, everything's just, connected, man. Like, wow. Right now. Okay. Again, I'm not saying that things are not interconnected. But any truth you can take too far and get terrible results. Number two, divine wisdom. The term Theosophy itself means divine wisdom. Ooh, fancy. How do you get this divine wisdom? Did you read it in the Bible? No, it turns out that Blavatsky talked to a bunch of ascended masters through channeling. So, depending on your religious outlook, She talked to a bunch of demons that told her this stuff.
So she's basically a witch.
Basically, yes. If you've ever seen a photo of Blavatsky, she got those very witchy.
I don't even need to see a photo. Just by
Yeah.
her name, I can tell exactly what she looks like.
She's got those Russian witchy eyes. Around this period, there were like a number of Russians and Eastern Europeans that sort of rose to prominence as like seers and prophets and stuff, and they all got this very, very kind of, like Crowley eyes, basically, kind of like thing. Very, very disturbing. So the divine wisdom refers to the belief in an ancient esoteric wisdom underlying all religions, which can be accessed through study and spiritual practice. Theosophy teaches that this wisdom is the foundation of all religious truths. So you see where they're going right there, right? Around this time, stuff from the East was very, very much in vogue. This was the era of the Golden Dawn, the rise of certain ideas in Freemasonry, and this idea that sort of like gripped the West, that the religions of the East were far more spiritual, man. They had deep truths that had been lost in the rush of modernism. Now, probably something to that, modernism was like pretty crazy, but there was this sort of, massive fetishization of, it's basically called Orientalism now. And, it's supposedly a bad thing. This sort of fetishization with anything from China or Japan or India. And this idea that, the ancients, they have so much to teach us. Well, really? I mean, I don't know how their society's doing. Again, I think that I'm a big fan of this idea. You can tell whether a tree is good or not by how good the fruit is. So all religions are basically the same. They all worship the same God. You just have to get at the fundamental truths. And of course, this is the death of all religious diversity. What you eventually get down to, if you try and reduce all religions down to the same thing, just some pot smoking hippie kind of, spiritualist crap that fundamentally means nothing. Just be a good person, man. Well, who defines what a good person is? You know what I mean? 3, karma and reincarnation. And if you're ever wondering how it was that sort of, transmigration and Hindu ideas like karma got into the West, it is primarily through movements like Theosophy. Theosophy incorporates the concepts of karma, the law of cause and effect, and reincarnation, the rebirth of the soul in successive bodies. Reincarnation, of course, is also a very, very Gnostic idea. These ideas suggest that individuals are responsible for their actions and that their current life circumstances are the results of past deeds, with future lives shaped by present actions. So the thing is, there is a very, very dark side to the ideas behind reincarnation, right? So, if if reincarnation is a thing, how long have we been here? How many times have you done the merry-go-round? Who decides, whether you go up in status or down in status? Any society based on reincarnation is bound to be like quite heavily repressive. If you look at the caste system in India, for example, it's based on this idea, right? If you're born as a Brahmin, you're born as a Brahmin because you were very, very virtuous in a previous life. And if you were born as I think it's a Dalit, is like the lowest caste, you're born there because you were bad in a previous life, right? So it's this very, very oppressive system where whatever bad stuff happens to a person, whatever circumstance they're born into, you can just blame their previous life. And instead of trying to work towards sort of being a better person for the being of a better person, everyone has their eye on the next life. And of course, you get insane versions of this, like certain versions of Tibetan Buddhism. I know, the West, particularly in this period, like to believe that Tibetan Buddhism was all peace, love, and roses, but it wasn't. They believe that people could be incarnated as bugs, and so therefore, if you built a house, you must make sure like not to destroy any insect because it might be it's negative karma, and just like all kinds of like crazy upshoots. Number 4, spiritual evolution. Theosophy teaches that humanity is on a path of spiritual evolution. progressing through various stages of development. This is one of the reasons why Marxists love Theosophy, because it's essentially stagism for the soul. This evolution is not limited to the physical realm, but encompasses mental, moral, and spiritual growth. So we're progressing. Don't you understand, man? Right? Like, there is a new evolution of society, a new evolution of religion. And to go back to the UN people, they are really, really all about this, right? They believe that the next stage of evolution is a global society, a global government, a global citizenry where, the UN essentially will control the entire earth. They believe in everyone else being disarmed except for the United Nations. I kid you not, right? So their solution to wars is to take weapons away from everybody except for the United Nations, who will very, very fairly step in and solve all conflicts with the weapons that they have.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that? The people who think that if you defend yourself from one of these new arrivals and they try to throw you in jail, what could possibly go wrong when you give away your guns and let them have guns? That sounds like a recipe for success, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly going to be a recipe for success for them. It's basically global communism, global Bolshevism, right? Like, we will have all of the guns, because obviously, as the government, we need to have guns, but you, the plebs, the normies, you do not. And we will decide when. So it's the idea of a global monopoly of violence, and they're very, very into this idea. I've read a couple of papers where they're basically, they want to sort of treat countries a bit like rented houses. So if a country, starts going off message, it can be sort of invaded and repossessed. Sanctions are very, very much like this. I don't think such a plan can work. I think it would lead to endless war. But I mean, what do I know, right? I'm just some guy on the internet. These people are, they have mystical knowledge, mate. They've been to the right universities. They've worked at the UN for 20 years. You know what they call themselves, by the way?
No, what do
World
they call
servants.
themselves?
World servants. That's what they call themselves. World servants. Robert Mueller was very, very fond of this phrase. We need more world servants, basically global bureaucrats. You know what I mean? What a
Sounds like the
conceited.
most nebulous term like imaginable I can think of right there. What does that even mean exactly? It can mean whatever you want it to mean.
And also incredibly conceited, right? Like, what do you do like for work? Oh, I'm a world servant.
That sounds like the perfect. I bet that's what Bojo calls himself in private every day. In this like tiny mind when he's not thinking about gay marriage in Ukraine. Actually,
Yes, actually, after I stopped being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I became a world servant. It pays very, very well. They get excellent smoked salmon at the United Nations. Sorry, just
that sounds like the perfect idea that would tickle these like little people's minds actually of our current like technocratic ruling class. This like ideology and religion sounds perfect for them. Like it's almost like tailored. It sounds exactly like progressivism, except you understand the theological and religious backing of it.
It is a bit sort of like a religion for bureaucrats. If you think about it, I never really sort of like thought of this, but now that you say that, it is a bit like, if we had to make a religion tailor made for the bureaucrat, right? This would be it, right? The bureaucrat has secret knowledge, by his position in government and access to all of the data that government collects, and in his mind, he is the one building the toy train set that is society. Deciding who lives and who dies, who gets money and who does not, who is friend, who is enemy. I'm gonna have to think more on that. Excuse me. um so yes, spiritual evolution, and this is one of the reasons why they're always like trying to like reform and overthrow society, because a lot of them basically believe that socialism or communism, particularly global socialism or communism, or a sort of technocratic government, or a combination of the two, is the next evolutionary step, and that there'll also be a moral evolutionary step where like everyone will get along and hate will disappear and no one will say a nasty word to each other and racism will be abolished, and it's a massive pipe dream. So 5, exploration of the unknown. Theosophy encourages the exploration of metaphysical and spiritual phenomena, demonology, essentially, including the nature of the soul, the afterlife, the existence of higher planes of consciousness. It supports the study of mysticism, occultism, and psychic experiences as a means to gain deeper insights into spiritual realities. Now, if you've got any experience messing with this kind of stuff, it's not good for you. And who knows what is actually on the other end of the cosmic phone line that you are jabbering into. People don't really seem to think of that, right? They're just like, oh,
It
yeah, I'm
sort
gonna.
of reminds me of that meme. I don't know if you're familiar with this, of like Joe Rogan and his people talking about the DMT elves, and they're in that like that sort of like fifth dimensional plane, like that DMT lets you have access to, right? And there's this giant like floating clown, and he's just like, if you just let me in, I'll give you secret knowledge, man. And they're like, that's so cool, man. Never mind that he's a demon, like like that he says it. It's just, it's so neat and cool, man. It's so interesting.
Yeah,
Sort of
man.
idea. It's open.
Secret knowledge, bro. Pass the joint, bro. I can't wait to like hook up with some of that secret knowledge, bro. I'll have like access to the mysteries of the universe that like no one else will have, bro. No, you just got pop psychology and theosophy classes, right? You can pick that crap up by reading Carlos Castaneda. I mean, it's hardly it's hardly groundbreaking, right? Um, 6, synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. This is another big one. Theosophy seeks to harmonize science, religion, and philosophy, believing that these three fields are not contradictory but complementary. It promotes an integrated approach to understanding the universe and human existence. So you can see how this, coupled with this sort of idea that all religions are the same, man, we're just all trying to get to the same god, man, the top of the mountain has many different paths, man, can also lead to like some very, very horrible outcomes. Faith is not is seen as part of science. There's nothing separate or divine about God anymore, right? You can start digging through people's brains to find God, right? You can derive from that this idea, God is just in someone's brain, bro, right? Like, we could make like something that would switch off the religious impulse, bro. Maybe we could have peace if like everyone just stopped believing in religion, right? Like all of these ideas you can trace back to Theosophy. And 7, the existence of a supreme reality. Theosophy posits the existence of an ultimate, unknowable, divine reality, often referred to as the absolute or the one. This supreme reality transcends all personal gods and religious doctrines, serving as the source of all existence. This is a fundamentally Gnostic idea, an idealist idea, a Hegelian idea, and also a very, very Jewish idea, or Kabbalistic idea to be precise. The idea that God is sort of like an unknowable force. Sometimes it's intelligent, sometimes it isn't. That sort of, through a series of emanations made the world. If you sort of take the Kabbalistic idea or the Hermetic idea, the end goal is to reunite God with itself, or some versions are humans were born to help God to understand the universe. The Hermetic conception is that all of the sparks in all of the people have to be all gathered together. The sort of Kabbalistic version of that is that there are certain Jewish sages that contain these very, very bright sparks. I believe there's like 12 of them alive on the earth at any time, but that each Jewish person also contains a brighter spark, and they must all be shepherded back into one geographical area in order for profit. And this leads, of course, into the next conception, which is that once the thing happens, something else will happen. The Messiah will appear, or if you're a Christian Zionist, Jesus will come back on his little wooden bus, or the Omega point will be reached, and in a sudden flash of understanding, everything will be revealed. It's literally profit. No one seems to really agree on what will happen when the thing happens. and in my opinion, a lot of this is just essentially sort of fantasizing about a better version of the world to come. There are some very extremist interpretations as well. Some people believe that in the world to come, they will have 1,000 slaves, and they will be elevated. It's essentially millennialism, and it's very, very bad. People don't live in sort of the world as it is because they're concentrating on trying to get to the world to come, to manifest the world to come, to recreate the world, all this like happy horseshit basically.
This very much sounds like the touristic idea of, the tiny hats will be rewarded with like 6 bazillion like goyim slaves, right? For being
Yes, yes,
great tiny
but to be
hats.
fair, it's got to be pointed out that the Jews are not a monolith, right? And so there are many, many different strains, and it is unfair to tar the entirety of Judaism with the extremist beliefs of some, even if many of the people with those extremist beliefs
Are
happen
part
to
of the
have a lot.
ruling like Zionist ideology, yeah.
Yes, yeah, basically. And I think that's really, really important because you could do the same thing with Christians. You're like, oh, the goddamn the Christians. Well, Christianity has many, many strains, and you kind of trying to compare like someone who believes in Greek Orthodoxy with someone with a Calvinist. You're going to get very, very different outcomes. So I think it is important to say, but there are some very, very extremist versions of that Theosophy enables. And I think at the end of it, a lot of this stuff is really just an excuse for bad behavior. Um, People like to behave badly, and they like it even more if they can be convinced that behaving badly is a good thing. Antinomianism, of course, is like a very, very old tradition. This idea that to sin is divine. This is a Gnostic idea. The more we sin, the closer we are to God. There's a variation that's like, the more we sin, the more we need to be forgiven by God, and so therefore the more grace we can accrue. The problem, of course, is that if any of these religious systems gain wide currency in any society, the society just collapses. Because everyone winds up at everybody else's throat, all trust breaks down, the most horrible perversions become manifest, and everything just falls apart.
And we see that most prominently in like whenever these people get in charge of societies. I think the most prominent examples in like modern history are the French Revolution, where they just like straight up changed the entire calendar and changed the state religion to the cult of the supreme being, actually, which was for a brief time controlled by Mr. Maximilian Robespierre himself, where I believe that he actually got to the point where he believed himself he was reason itself and he should be worshipped. And like, and if you didn't agree with that idea, you should be put to death because you're against reason, man.
Yeah.
It sounds so similar to what you were discussing earlier about these people. It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
thing.
yeah. That's actually a really good point. The French Revolution was indeed very much the same thing, right? The revolutionaries, the Jacobins, they wanted to sort of delete, well, Christianity in particular. Of course, they hated the Christians, and so they were like, oh well, instead of Christianity, we'll have the cult of reason, the cult of the
Cult of
supreme
the
being.
supreme being, yes.
Yeah, and they did their own version of Year Zero where they reformed the calendar and they like reformed everything, and then they
And like we have to get rid of the people who aren't like enlightened because they're enemies of the good. So we must
yes,
kill them. It's immoral if you don't kill them. That's wicked. I think Mr. Robespierre even said that. If you don't actually kill these like people, you're letting the revolution die by not killing them.
yeah.
Because so it requires bloodshed. It requires mass murder of um, evil, the evil ones who are not enlightened, if you will.
Yeah, well, this is how they do, basically, right? There's a preparatory sort of footsies kind of like phase where they attempt to convince and or coerce everyone who can be convinced or coerced. And then once this process is complete, they have a group of people who are weak-willed, who can be convinced and or coerced to support the government, and then they have sort of a hardcore reactionary group, the people who cannot be convinced, argued round, or coerced, and that's generally when the killing begins, and they're like, right, we've given you enough chance, because it was these things are never voluntary. They're always presented as being voluntary. I kind of the way I always imagine it is someone trying to talk you into rape. You know what I mean? Like, because that's they're like, well, I'm definitely going to rape you, right? Like, if I can get you to do it by like just talking you into it, that's fine. But if you don't agree, like, the fists are going to come out, right? It's a very, very, in my opinion, very fundamentally evil ideology. And
Or it's like similar to like if you live in like Stalinist, like the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, it's like the Central Committee declares that the sky is against the principle of national of like socialism, and you dare to think about that. However, if you dare to think about that in the wrong way, you're going to put in the gulag. It doesn't matter if it's insane, right? It's what the Soviet Politburo has declared to be true, essentially, right?
yes, yes, and this is one of the things that the Gnostics tend to sort of wind up doing, because they have that special knowledge. They believe that they are the purveyors of this special knowledge. And because they believe that, the new world, the world to come, the Tikkun Olam, whatever it is, the communism, the perfect society is just around the corner. Um, Sooner or later, some bright spark comes up with the idea, well, we could just kill all the people who are standing in the way of it, and everything would be fine. Which is quite funny, because these are the same people, by the way, who generally believe in social constructionism, right? So these are the same people who believe that every single part of human nature is just constructed by society, right? Therefore, if you could have the perfect society, we could overwrite the nature of man. The French revolutionaries were like this, the tabula rasa. But at the same time, it always ends up eventually there. Even after they have transformed society, there are some who stubbornly refuse to get along with the program. If their beliefs were true, then surely once you had reformed society, everyone would be the way that you want them to be. But part of this is the problem, that they don't really sort of believe in fundamental truth. They don't believe in human nature. Again, you can see this thing from Theosophy, this idea that everyone is the same regardless of where on earth they come from. I don't I don't see that being true. I know that it's very much an idea that is in vogue, right? That no matter where you come from, everyone's exactly the same, or the slightly softer version. There is more that unites us than divides us. Really, I mean, source required, bro. Um, that's not generally what I am seeing. Like what I see, around me, and when you look back through history, is that religious and ethnic differences lead to conflict. But of course, if you're a Marxist and you're trying to overthrow society, conflict is a good thing. They've got this whole idea, basically, of conflict theory, that you spark conflict in society, so that you can sort of gin up the revolutionary energy and overthrow society. And they love that kind of stuff. I mean, they're basically doing the same thing with race now that they were originally doing with class. Um, and once they get what they want, which I don't know, I mean, I'd give it 50-50 that they're going to get what they want. The results, in my opinion, will be horrible.
No, we see the just like right now with the results of these people's Vox Papatao, if you will, being implemented are in Europe and America. It's essentially like, the Pakistani rapist who like gets invited into Germany and like flown in by an NGO, and then days later, like, murders a child for no reason. And if you dare to like question this, you're an enemy. Therefore, we're going to put you in prison under this new hate speech law. He's going to be rewarded under this new system, and that's actually moral and just, and you're the evil one for pointing this out, actually. You're the unjust one. You're unenlightened. And that's essentially like the capital of these people's like religion that's being implemented across the West. Obviously, there's economic reasons for it too, but this is bigger than money. This is way bigger than money. These people have all the money in the entire world. Uh, they
They
all
certainly
the
do.
WEF types in the world, certainly the EU. Like these people have the money. It's not about money. No, there's something much deeper behind it. It's like justifying them to do this. It's convincing them, like the religious impulse, if you will, being manipulated in the wrong direction here.
Indeed, one of the biggest errors I see a lot of otherwise quite smart people make is thinking that this is all about money. This is not about money. This is about religion, and it's also about race for some people as well. Um, I like to sort of use an example. I don't know if you've ever played Grand Theft Auto or video games generally,
I have
but
actually, yes.
right, you ever got the money cheat in Grand Theft Auto?
I've heard of it, yes.
Okay, so you can get a money cheat in Grand Theft Auto where basically you have infinite money, right? And what does everyone do once they get the infinite money cheat? Well, they just start screwing around, right? They can literally do whatever they want, and I think that the international elites are very very much like that. They already have all the money. They've got more money than they could ever use, and so in order to sort of fill the void in their life, they start trying to mess with reality and just they pick up ideology or they pick up weird religions. I think it's highly likely, actually, for example, that Frankism and Sabbateanism has spread through various international elites. It's very very hard to tell though, because none of these people are going to come out and actually say that they are that thing. Um, but based on their actions, it wouldn't surprise me at all. It's not just about the money. It's about the ideology. It's about the transformative vision, the idea that you've changed the world, you've left your mark upon the world, you've made the world better. Whatever the hell that means.
Well, better in these people's minds means that there's a brand new Pakistani like delicacy shop near you that sells I don't even know what fucking Pakistanis eat. I don't know, goat meat. And like a neighborhood in Britain is less white, and is more culturally enriched. Basically, that's what winning looks like to these people.
Well, they don't seem to like religion very much. I mean, they really really hate Christianity for obvious reasons, but they seem to be okay with Islam as long as Islam is being used to batter Christianity. I imagine that if we ever got to the point where Islam had triumphed over Christianity, they would then go to war on Islam. Um, their general position seems to be that all religions, except for their own, are extremism. And the way they define extremism is actually believing in a religion, right? So you can be a Christian as long as you're, like an Anglican or, something that's like, oh, we have women priests
You're
that,
pro gay rights, pro immigration, pro
yeah,
diversity, pro women, basically.
yeah. It's just an affectation that you wear, like, the Christianity could just be a rainbow lanyard that you wear or something like that. But when it comes to actual religions, people that have actually deeply held beliefs, and most important, people who are willing to suffer for those beliefs, people that are
True
willing
believers,
to,
yes.
and people who are willing to just say no. um I think that's the thing about religion that they really really don't like, is that the truly religious, if you come to them and you're like, hey, you should have women priests and gay priests, and you should have like a pride parade in your church, right? And here's a whole bunch of peer reviewed studies, and and they're very very skilled in trying to like brute force their way. The truly religious will just be like, no, no, we're not doing that. And they'll be like, but we've got a study, it's current year. What about being on the the right side of history? They'll be like, no, 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 bugger off. So they don't like that. The ideal sort of populace for them are people who have just enough religion to be influenced by stupid sounding spiritualist hogwash, 60s marijuana kind of like hippie sort of like stuff, like wow man, what if we are God, bro? What if like we are God understanding itself, bro? Like that kind of like occult bookshop kind of like tier crap. That's the kind of religion that they like, because that can be used. The actual people of faith who are secure and steadfast in their faith, they don't like that, and
Yes,
especially if you
they're not
refer
a
to their
rival castle to the current one in power, yes.
yes, very much a rival castle. Yeah, absolutely.
Anything that
Um,
genuinely like controls and motivates people that isn't like controlled by them, essentially, money, pills, fast food, prawn, stuff like this is a threat to them, actually. That's why they're, like, actually weirdly enough protective of these things. That's a source of their power, actually, keeping their ideology going.
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons why they enjoy sin so much and they enjoy sort of putting sin out in the world is that it just hurts and destabilizes people, and it makes it harder for them to get a sense of direction. It makes them have less children. It destabilizes their communities. It just generally makes them weaker and easier to rule. And the sort of vision that they kind of seem to have is it's basically Soviet style communism. I mean, you see, look, next time anyone talks about we're going to set up a council, just substitute the word Soviet for the word council, because that's literally exactly what they mean, right? So when someone comes up and says, "Oh, we're gonna have a people's assembly, we're gonna have a people's council," they just mean a people's Soviet. It's exactly the same thing, and it has exactly the same problems that it had in the USSR. And they wind up with a society where they have a small, highly regarded elite that control everything, and but not just in the material sense, but also in the mental sense. Again, I'm reminded of Orwell's 1984, where the party, they just tell you what to think, and even if what they're telling you to think is completely contradictory. I mean, look, race is a really, really good example of this. Okay, so supposedly race doesn't exist, it's just a social construct, except when it isn't, right? Like, you get all these people there, they exist simultaneously in two worlds. When they need to say that race doesn't exist, they say that it doesn't exist. But when they do need to say that it exists, so that they can say, like, Black Lives Matter, or we have to release this black person from jail, or it's horrible that this Pakistani migrant was imprisoned for doing something horrible, then all of a sudden it exists. You know what I mean? It's this double think, and Orwell really, really, in my opinion, hit the nail on the head with doublethink. You see many people existing in this state all through the Western world, and I think our global rulers are very, very happy with this, because ultimately the way that you declare fealty to this regime is by demonstrating that you will deny the evidence of your senses. Again, to go back to Orwell, the party demanded that you reject the evidence of your own senses. It was its first and final demand. And it is, right? That's how you demonstrate to the regime that you can be trusted. That's how you demonstrate that they can give you power, that you are willing to say that this man in a dress, with a 5 o'clock shadow and badly applied makeup, is indeed a woman, right? Like, it is these kinds of demonstrations of reality denial that demonstrate that you are ready to go on to the next step.
No, we, like, see how much fealty these people actually have, and we see that these types, like, famously true believers of this stuff, like, who believe, in total race equality, we're all equal, man. And we see them go to these, like, newly diverse cities like New York City, and, like, they get, like, stabbed to death with their girlfriends right in front of them, or their wives, in the street. And they legitimately, their relatives will stand there and call and say, it wasn't his fault. It was a victim of social circumstances. There's nothing deeper behind that. It must have been a fluke, type of thing. Like, to the point where they'll actually, like, even sacrifice their own lives for this stuff. Is the fealty that they possess in their side, and that's that's a quality I wish we had more of, actually, in a strange way.
Well, we're actually starting to see this happen on a societal level. One of the words that you are going to start hearing more in the next couple of years, along with global majority and global citizen, is the idea of world justice, which is a way whereby the global government will take money and assets and productivity from wealthier countries and distribute it directly to poorer countries for world justice. It's basically social justice, just applied to the entire world with the same horrific and horrible results. I kind of really hoped that this whole thing would start dialing back, but the fact of the matter is that these people have so much in terms of resources. And they really do have all the goddamn money. It's insane how much money and control they have. They're not really going to give up. The only question really is whether they are still transfixed on 2030. And I can't figure out personally exactly why it is they chose 2030. I've seen a lot of different theories. I suspect that it is some kind of religious thing, whether numerological or astrological or something like that. But they're very, very fixed on 2030 for some weird reason. They're like the revolution, it has to be done by 2030. And if they don't get it by 2030, what are they going to do? Are they're going to pivot to 2040, or is there another numerological date coming up? Will we suddenly discover that, oh yes, we missed the 2030 target, but for some weird reason 2038 is the new year? I don't know, but they're absolutely hot and heavy to get this revolution. And much like previous revolutions, many of the people who believe they are going to be at the top of this power structure once the revolution happens, they're not going to be. Many of the groups that are enabled by the regime to destroy society will be very, very disappointed when they realize that it was not their revolutionary energy that enabled so much change. The reason they accomplished so much change is because they were allowed to and boosted by the regime. BLM is a classic example of this, by the way. It was the regime that enabled them by not only assisting them, but making sure that they would not be punished for their actions. But I'm sure that many people within BLM, they believe that, they did it. I see this a lot in politicians as well. People who rise in the structure, believing that they did it all themselves. No, you didn't. You did it because you were assisted by the regime, because you were convenient and useful to the goals of the regime. And if you were to ever go off message, if you were to ever forget who your masters really were, you'd be slapped down in an instant.
No, this sort of reminds me of, this also goes back to the Schmidian exception, right? Where like Governor Gavin Newsom, right? Like basically went full clean house on these people in San Francisco the moment a important Chinese official was going to visit there. And he essentially arrested the homeless, the BLM types, the thugs, like basically the like armed wing of the left essentially there. And he basically cleaned the streets for a day so this person could visit San Francisco safely. And I bet those people at that moment realized, oh shit, my freedom and my like ability to control the situation here was an illusion entirely, and that it was completely I'm on a leash by a greater power here, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's always fascinating when this is one of the things I've noticed about the regime generally. Um, when it's something that the regime wants, every lever of power will be moved. Every incentive will be incentivized. The choice environment will be mangled in whatever way they see fit. COVID, of course, being the example par excellence. When it's something the regime doesn't want, all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Oh, we would, but human rights. Oh, it's undemocratic. Like literally they'll pull any excuse. um Again, COVID really sort of brought home the lengths that the regime can go to if they want to, right? They are perfectly capable of abrogating your human rights and doing whatever they want. It's just whether they want to or not. And unfortunately, many people still exist in the sort of delusionary state of believing that the people that are ruling their countries are actually ruling their countries. This hasn't been true for a while. I mean, I don't know. It would be hard to
Since 1945,
probably since
conclusively, I can we
1945.
say, I think we could
Yes,
say,
but it has
100%.
been getting progressively worse. Yeah,
Yeah, 1945 in the pre World War II era, we could say there were at least like sovereign state actors, right? You could at least say Germany, Italy, Japan, Romania are sovereign actors. They're not influenced by some other country that's dictating their actions, right? There's no illusion that there's a bureaucracy or someone pulling the strings, right? You know that it's the Austrian painter in charge of Germany. You know it's Benito Mussolini in charge of Italy. You know it's Ion Antonescu in charge of Romania, right? You know it's FDR in charge of America. You know it's Stalin in charge of the Soviet Union, right? There's no this like illusion that like we have with modern democracy in quotes. We have this like essentially flailing puppet corpse like Joe Biden, who everybody knows one thing, it's that Joe Biden is not in charge of America, but who is up to complete mystery essentially, right? That's the
Well,
modern system we have.
it's the banks fundamentally. They're in charge of your country. It has been thus since 1913. I honestly think that the foundation of the Federal Reserve was probably one of the most horrible things to ever happen on the global stage, because it enabled the money printer go brrr for all of the worst actors in the world. And the Rockefellers have been writing off that for like ages. And again, to go back to my earlier point, once they got the money printer, they looked around themselves and said, oh, what we really need to do is change up a few things. You know what I mean? I don't like the way this place is. How about we start a few wars? You know what I mean? And because the international project, by definition, is fundamentally anti-nation state, which means it is against any people being a nation. So it is against any group of people having any sort of like ethnically homogenous society, just by definition. Now, they say that the reason why they're against the nation state is because of wars. But that's a bit rich when a lot of them had a big hand in starting those wars. So I think they just want total control. Personally, they wish to live as gods, like Roman emperor style. They don't want the kind of power that they've got now. They want the kind of power where, like the kind of power that Uday Hussein used to have in Iraq. He'd be driving down the street, he sees someone having a wedding party, he goes in, he snatches the wife, rapes her, and then dumps her back outside the wedding, and no one can say anything. That's the kind of power these people want, right? The kind of power they have at the moment is clearly not enough. They wish to literally be as gods, where they could strike down, murder anyone in the street who even looked at them funny. That's the sort of power that they want, in my opinion.
Yes, you get the sense that's what the Klaus Schwabs of the world, going back to the thumbnail of the stream, the WEF, the Tony Blairs, the Ursula von der Leyens, Tony Blinken, types. That's the world they want, actually. That's the world they envision happening, right? And you see that in the rhetoric, too, where if you don't eat the bugs, if you don't buy into, the jab, if you don't do this, you don't do that, well, you're a bad person, and therefore, self-terminating you is actually a good thing. And that's what's going to be the norm for the mainstream going on into the future they desire for us. And we got a preview of this actually during COVID, right? Where, like, if you didn't take the jab, right, first it was incentives, let's nudge you, sort of that nudge report that we saw from the UK, right? However, when that kind of failed and there was this hard group core of resenters, right, dissidents, who still wouldn't go along even with money and incentives, that's when they kind of brought out the stick, right, and was like, you're bad people and like you should be like executed essentially type of deal. And that's when we got to see what they truly thought about people
Yeah,
who even remotely dissented against power.
precisely. So it is couched as a request, but it is really a demand, and it only remains a request until all the people who are amenable to that request, who can be talked around by softer methods, have submitted. Once they've got all of those people, then out comes the heavy stick. They're all about that, because they don't fundamentally really believe in sort of in Republican democracy, in representation. They generally speaking have a very, very low opinion of ordinary people, whilst at the same time um, deliberately harming those ordinary people. So they'll be like, oh, the ordinary people, they don't know what they want, but at the same time they will start destroying education so that it's impossible for the ordinary people to even articulate what they want. It's very, very blame the victim kind of thing, and I think it goes back to this sort of weird, like I was saying, this sort of will to power, this belief that they are born to rule. that they have, special knowledge, that if the world was simply structured the way that they want, everything would be fine. And, all through history, you see the horrible, horrible results of such people. Do we have any questions, by the way, from wow, a whole 6 viewers? Oh, wow, man. We're going to be famous, bro. Anyone got any questions? I might wrap up. How long did you want to go for, mate?
I was going to say about an hour and 10 minutes, so I think we'll go ahead and start wrapping up here. If there's no
Okay.
more questions in the next couple of seconds here. But I think I really enjoyed this conversation, Mr. Newsfist. I think it was very enlightening. I think we learned something about our global technocratic ruling class from this, about these, kind of that will to power and that sort of, what would you call it, philosophizing? That religious
Theosophy.
theosophy. Okay,
Yeah.
yes, theosophy. The sort of the name for the new Gnostic religion, essentially. Basically,
Yeah.
they're going to
Yeah.
that occupies the place in the elite class right now. The
Oh,
Christianity
and you
once
should look
occupied.
into that. And actually, there's a really good episode of Empire of Lies, just to shill one of the shows that I am on, that talks expressly about this and the crazy religious beliefs of Robert Mueller, who was one of the sort of big brains behind the United Nations. Here we go. I'll send you the link. Maybe if you can post it in the chat, that would be awesome. If anyone's interested in that, you can check out that episode. I thought it was pretty good, actually. Yeah, they're crazy, man. These people be crazy. Excuse me. Where's
No,
the
I think somebody said it best when it's like, yeah, these people are insane, but they also have tons of power and guns. So it's like a giant 20-foot baby with a chainsaw. Like you have to take it seriously, even though it's insane and retarded.
but not just guns, weapons of the mind. I mean, there's that old saying, or maybe it's from Starship Troopers, I forget. But like a man has a gun, but if you can disable the arm, he cannot fire the gun. If you can disable the brain, he may not have the will to even raise the gun. They tend to attack sort of higher in the kill chain, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Disable the urge to resist. You know what I mean? And I think this is one of the reasons why they love to just confuse stuff all the time and just there is that old saying that if they can get you to believe absurdities, they can get you to commit atrocities. Um, and I think they just want to undermine sort of anything that would allow people to sort of get a clear fix on what it is that they want, who their friends are, who their enemies are, all this kind of like other stuff, and just turn all of society, because the 90s was very, very much like that, right? I'm a Gen Xer, and one of the things particularly about the 90s was it was a decade where no one really knew what was good and no one really knew what was evil. One of the, I guess, benefits of the current age is, since COVID and since a lot of the rise of trans, um, for many people, it has become very, very clear what evil is. There's some stuff you can just look at and you're like, man, that's evil. Like, there's no other word for it. You can't finesse your way around that, no matter how hard you try. And I think this has led a lot of people back to Christianity or to other religion, because they're like, well, if there is such a thing as concentrated evil, there must be something like concentrated good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think someone said it best when it's like, if the elite who control the world, the top billionaires, Bill Gates, like, Klaus Schwab, these types of people, Hillary Clinton, believe in Satan himself, then why don't you? Because if they believe it, there's a good reason for it. And you should definitely consider it there. But I think I'm going to wrap up the stream there, Mr. Newsfist. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think our audience enjoyed it as well. Is there anything you'd like to show before we close out the stream?
I would, yes. I do a twice weekly news show called Happening TV that just covers the happenings of the day, and I do like funny videos afterwards. You can get all of my stuff at www.newsfist.net. It's on Monday and Thursday. come along. And of course, I do Empire of Lies with Use the Eunuch on Thursday evening, 11 p.m. London time. I think that's like 6 p.m. EST. I don't know your crazy American times. We're getting a lot of really good feedback on that show. That's sort of more, I don't know what you call it, political philosophy, and just sort of exploring deeper topics on how the world is actually run. So yeah, check it out.
Definitely, and if you enjoyed this channel, just give me a like and subscribe. It's always appreciated. I make good stuff, and I only have high IQ people on my channel, and no women ever. And that's my promise of the AE channel. And if you enjoy that, gentlemen, please definitely give me a like and subscribe. It's always appreciated, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
having me, man.